What's happening, everybody? My name is Sean Pitcher. This is the Roots Podcast. Today we have on Matthew Pitcher, who is my brother. He is a licensed master's social worker. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, awesome. Being that this foundation of this is Roots, this is part of my roots. This is my brother. Even though he is not directly in athletics, I think some of the skills that he provides, with the clients that he works with, are very valuable to anyone that essentially anyone that is in athletics or works with athletes and sports in general. I think a lot of us probably do some of the things we're going to talk about today, regardless if we're thinking about them or not, or if we know the exact definition or if we know the research. But that's something we're definitely going to dive into a lot more. So I'm super excited to have you on.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on. I'm glad to be part of this.
So first question I want to ask before we start diving into some of those topics is, obviously I know who you are as a person, but the viewers don't know who you are. Can you give us who Matt Pitcher is? Dig into that a little bit for us.
Yeah. Well, what a great question. Who is someone, right? There's a lot to be said. I mean, I think I share a similar story with yours, of course. I know I listened to your first episode and you told a lot about your background, but very similar. Grew up in Endicott, right? Went to UE. I guess a little bit about myself and maybe about why I chose to be a social worker. I know you mentioned our parents and having more empathy for people who have mental health or have mental health diagnoses. I think that having grown up with a parent who has bipolar helped me a lot learn empathy for others and broke the stigma down of mental health for me a lot, and helped me realize that there's a lot of people out there who are struggling with mental health that we can help change or help people in understanding what they're going through. So I decided to go to a field such as social work to help other people and almost help myself in my relationship with my own parents or with other people to be the best person I can be. So
I think from that understanding, it definitely helps you understand more, with our own mother's, bipolar that she deals with every single day, be able to understand a little bit more what they're going through. We're never going to be able to be in their shoes, go what they're going through. We're never going to be able to have the same symptoms that they have. But I think at least being there, listening, understanding to the best of our ability is, in a lot of cases, it's just what they want. They don't want solutions. They don't want you to be telling them what to do. They just want someone to open their ears, talk to them for about 15, 20 minutes, shoot them a quick text, and just be heard for a second. Because sometimes, especially if you look at athletes, right, a lot of times the backgrounds and environment they come from, they may have never been heard, right? It's push things away, push stuff back, be tough, just figure it out, get over it. And a lot of times, like, in the long run, in the long term, that doesn't always make things better. It can make it worse. And then you just fall into this same loop over and over, because that's all you know. And if a situation comes up where you have the opportunity to talk, you're like, oh, well, people just told me to just get over it and I'll be fine. But yeah. I'm sure you see on a regular basis that doesn't work out.
Right. And I mean, I feel like a big stigma on mental health, especially with more, I can imagine in athletics, especially where you're kind of supposed to have this role of being really great and powerful and strong. And, with mental health, unlike, like a physical injury, perhaps, you can see someone with a broken arm and it's casted and you can say, oh, I can see that, your arm is broken. But with mental health, you can't always see the person and knowing that they're struggling internally. So it's not oftentimes until you ask those questions, hey man, how are you doing? And it's not just, I'm okay or I'm fine. You're like, no, really, tell me what's going on. Like, I want to hear, how you're really doing. We try to get down to more of the deeper end of the person's psyche.
And that's something I would do on a regular basis. Anywhere I've been is just look beyond that answer, right? Because everybody gives the general answer, the okays, the fines, the goods, I'm greats, right? But based off your body language, you're telling me something a lot different.
Yeah.
So that's where sometimes you got to pull those people to the side, have a conversation, but also know the environment you're in. Like, is this the right place to pull them to the side? Do I need to have do I need to just shoot them a text after the lift or the training session? You know, is it something of a concern? I need to bring in another staff member so we both have a conversation with them because somebody else has a better relationship with them. Um, 'Cause, I mean, that's one of the things I used to do, right? Like I used to get so tired of hearing people like, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm fine, like over and over and over and over.
Right.
I actually started to do, I called it a wow. I started doing a word of the week
Yeah.
with one of my coworkers at my previous position I was at, just to kind of throw in a different word to make it different. Like, oh, I'm marvelous today, or like I'm fantastic, or I'm super duper, right? And it's stuff like that that's different and throws people off a little bit, but they're like, okay, he's trying to make it funny. He's trying to like give me something that's outside the norm. And he's trying to like really be a real person and not just a robot.
Yeah. It almost becomes more of a conversation starter. You know, when someone says I'm fine, it's like a conversation ender. Like, oh, you're fine. All right. I guess there's nothing to be said then, right?
Yeah. Or if you say so crazy, we're like, I'm spendiferous. They're like, they stop in there. I mean, you go say this to somebody at your work right now, anybody who's listening to this, and they're going to look at you and stop in their tracks and say, wait, did you just say what? And then all of a sudden it's like you got them hooked. Because there was
Absolutely.
something they're just not used to. I mean, you go through life or you go through the halls or you go on the fields and it's just like, it becomes so automatic in a lot of senses that you need to throw out those questions, those different sayings to kind of break up the monotony.
Yeah,
Because it just becomes like the same stuff over and over and over.
absolutely.
So I know one of the big topics you wanted to talk about today, specifically was, motivational interviewing, which I think any of us in this case have used, could use, or again, it could be something that, again, someone on this could now learn about to try to incorporate into their practice as a practitioner. Can you just kind of explain to us, like, what is that? What is motivational interviewing?
Sure. So I first learned about motivational interviewing within one of my first internships when I was in my MSW program. I was interning at a methadone clinic, or what they consider a medicated assisted treatment. People who suffer from addiction, who are in need of a substitute for opioid addiction. And I had a great mentor who told me about motivational interviewing, and it's a evidence-based practice. There's actually thousands of studies that have supported its efficacy in that it is an effective practice and helps people actually change. It's all based on the motivation to help people change, basically. So while originally it was founded to help people change with an addiction, they found that it's actually been helpful as well in other professions and other settings such as healthcare. And even recently, I know a lot of people have been talking about it within the sports field and how we can help athletes find the motivation to change. So I thought, I'm using this in my practice. I'm trying to help people promote change and harness motivation to make change for the better. How I can't, athletes use this as well. I thought about you immediately and was like, I'm sure you have times where you find resistance in athletes, or maybe people are kind of ambivalent. They're on the fence, like, I kind of want to do this, but I don't really want to change this. And you have to ask these specific questions to try to harness this motivation to change. And how can we promote people to move in the right direction? And the approach of motivational interviewing takes from an earlier clinical individual, Carl Rogers, who founded person-centered therapy, a person-centered approach, which is all about empathy and open questions and unconditional positive regard, really building rapport with people and being an ally to them and understanding their struggles and helping them change. So that's kind of a little bit about motivational interviewing and what it's about.
You mentioned open-ended questions. Like, do you feel those are a lot more optimal because versus like a closed-ended question? Like, obviously closed-ended, you're going to get a quick kind of decisive answer, whereas an open-ended, it can really go in multiple directions. But maybe like the pluses and minuses regarding those two different types of how you ask something to try to get an answer from somebody.
Sure. If I feel like if you're really trying to build a relationship with someone and looking to find or help people move in the right direction, open-ended questions are going to be the right direction to go to. You think of closed-ended questions, it's usually just a yes or a no. So when you're asking open-ended questions, it's kind of exploratory. You're exploring more in depth about, how might they be thinking about this particular thing, or, tell me about this belief and how you have this belief, and, what are some of the things that led you to have this belief, and gives you more of a broad approach so that you can continue a conversation. Even with a basic conversation like this, you ask an open-ended question, you're going to hear a lot more. But if you just ask something that's a yes or no, it's almost like the conversation's ready to end.
Yeah, it's like, do you like motivational interviewing? Yes. And it's like it's cut off, it's done. It's like, all right, well, can you expand on this? Oh, can you do this? Can you do that? It's like, all right, well, now there's gonna be 3-4 questions derived off of that. And now you just start getting the person to open up a little more to hopefully give you the information that you need to assist or help them depending on what the concern is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you give us an example of how you've possibly used this currently or in the past with motivational interviewing, just so maybe someone can kind of get a visual idea in their head, like if you're walking up to somebody right now, or you had a client that you're walking up to and you knew you're going to use this tactic, like can you give this example, like what would that look like, or how would you approach them?
Sure. So motivational interviewing, I think it's something that's always kind of like it's playing in the background as I'm talking to someone. In my field, working in addictions, I work in an inpatient setting. So people who are there for inpatient treatment, usually anywhere between 14 and 28 days, you're really getting people at sometimes the lowest point in their addiction. And some people may still be kind of ambivalent about their willingness to change with their drug use. So, you may have someone who's kind of on the fence with their willingness to change. So you may start by asking, like, well, tell me a little bit about, some of the reasons why you do want to change, and tell me some of the reasons why you kind of want to remain the same. And you can explore their own thoughts on how, what is called a motivation interview is like change talk. So you're always trying to promote change talk, and leaning them towards the area where you want to promote the area of change. So sobriety is usually always the area that you're trying to move towards people to in addiction. For example, maybe with athletes, if you're wanting to help someone have a better sleep schedule, right? Get 8 hours of sleep. There's a bunch of great research that shows that 8 hours is usually a good or optimal amount. And if someone's like coming to you and, coach, I'm only getting 4 hours, I'm feeling really sluggish, and you're like, okay, well, tell me more about that. And you want to get someone to the optimal area of 8 hours, tell me a time when you felt your best. Tell me a time when, you felt like you weren't tired. And they may tell you, oh yeah, that night I think I slept around 8 hours, or I actually had a good night rest at that point. And you can kind of affirm that, well, like that sounds like when you get out 8 hours, you feel at your best, and guide people towards their own answer. Because a lot of people have the knowledge within them, and they know what they need to do to change. It's just a matter of slightly pushing people in the right direction, and rather not than telling them what to do, but just rather slightly giving these little pushes or guidance towards the right direction.
Do you feel they don't do it because of their environment or their past behaviors, or like if they know it already, then what's essentially, and again, I know the answer to this, but what's causing them to not want to make the right choice? If they already have the background information, they know it, they could be a really intelligent, high level individual. What causes people to not take that step on a consistent basis?
I think people get pretty comfortable doing the same thing. We're creatures of habit. We like doing the same thing. And once we find ourselves in a comfortable habit, any slight amount of change, there's usually some form of resistance. I think anyone has ever wanted to change. A lot of people say, I want to start exercising. Those first 2-3 days when they start exercising, they're putting in work and it's hard and they're struggling and they're like, I don't like this. This sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But hey, prolonged change, right? You're going to be getting a better outcome of what you want. But that initial part of change is the hardest part. So a lot of people will put up resistance or have the ambivalence to that because that initial stage of change is so difficult for people.
And I mean, I could tell you any place I've been, I mean, I've come across that on multiple occasions. You almost have, I mean, there's almost like different levels of athletes. You have some that are kind of 100% going to do it, 100% not going to do it. You got some athletes that may take them, I'll do anything you tell me to do, and they'll do it all in a week. And then I've had some where it could be months, 6 months, a year before they start coming around and actually feeling like it's necessary. And it's funny though, because a lot of times it's almost like high school, like when guys are getting close to going to college and playing, or when they get towards the end of college and they might have the opportunity to go to the pros, it's like all of a sudden it becomes, I don't have a lot of time left, and now I have to take it seriously, and now I have to do something about it. And I'm sure a lot of coaches that listen to this are always like, well, if you did something about it the last 3 or 4 years, you could be so far ahead in such a better position, but we can't take back time. It is what it is. But how would you say, how do you get ahead of it earlier on instead of having guys wait to that last minute?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the toughest part in approaching that. I think education is usually your best bet. Educating people on the benefits of change, and a lot of it, if you have a great rapport with the client or with the athlete, right, and you can have a real serious talk with them, sometimes you can start finding them promoting that change talk, or that willingness to start making some changes. In the early stages, there may be some ambivalence, even working with someone within psychology. I know we're just talking about the stigma, and people may not willing to ask for help within that area. If you find yourself where you catch the problem early, or catch them where you want to make the change, start building rapport with that person, start building that relationship, so that you can have the serious conversation before it's too late.
Yeah, where it may be early in their career and they maybe keep you doing the same thing, but if they trust you, you can have that real conversation, and they know it's going to come from a good place, rather than they're just saying it to say it to you. Now, one of the things that I know we touched a little bit on before we jumped in the call is, you said, make the person feel in control and make their own decisions. Now, I know in an athletic setting that can kind of go two ways, right? It can be challenging, right? Like as a coach or as a practitioner, right? To a certain extent, like you need to be in control and you need to give direction, because if you don't, right, the athlete may not do the tasks or things that are expected of them. So how do you meet in the middle, right? Like I want to make you feel in control, and you ultimately have to make your own decisions, but then there's other stressors that I'm getting from other people. It could be a coach, it could be from higher up, that are wanting me to get you to do something, but you're not ready for it. And then I'm trying to tell them like, hey, like you got to give me more time. Well, they got to get to this result like right now. Like, I don't care what you got to do. And it's like, you just have all these levels of tension between you, the coaches, the upper management. Like, I know you're not directly in athletics, but like looking at that type of scenario, like how do you give the athlete control, but then manage all the things around you? I know that's probably a tough question on the spot to answer, but
I can give you a little insight on that. I think, there's a difference between like, for one, like giving people control, or what would be called like autonomy, right? Someone's ability to make decisions on their own. That's usually what helps people promote change the most. When we look at motivation, there's usually, you can look at it in two ways. There's intrinsic motivation, or internal and extrinsic or external motivation. So internal motivation is when you're internally motivated, you're coming to the conclusion on your own accord. And then there's the external motivators, which are like you said, coach is telling you that you need to do this at this time frame, right? So in a lot of cases, in some of the research that I found, intrinsic motivation is usually the more beneficial one. It helps people change the most. When you have a lot of external factors and people are telling you, you have to do this by this time, and you don't do this, blah, blah, blah. Like it's a lot harder for people to find the motivation to change when people are telling you from an external point. So when you're talking with someone and you're trying to promote that change talk, you kind of want to affirm some of the things that they're saying that is moving them in what you believe to be the right direction. You don't want to catch yourself in what we call like an expert trap, where you're the expert and you're telling them what to do. You have to let athletes or people come to their own conclusion about things. And like you said, it's hard, because if someone is already going in the wrong direction, how do you reel them back in and say, this is where we want you to go? Um, you can educate people, and education is usually your best bet, but you don't want to seem like you're enforcing something on them. Like I said, you want to have it be intrinsic and allow people to come to conclusions on their own end to help really promote the change.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the toughest things is when you try to shove information down somebody when they don't want to learn it during a certain point in time, like you're not going to win them over. Or if all you go and talk, if all you go and talk to them, like if I just go talk about nutrition 24/7, or strength coaches go talk about strength and conditioning, or sports psych says like you got to get your mental wellness better, like you're going to lose them pretty fast. And then to try to get them to now fix their issues, now they've lost possibly trust in you. And then I've seen that in a lot of scenarios where that relates over to other places they go, right? Like if I have an athlete that has a bad experience with me, well, now they associate nutrition as X, Y, and Z because that's the only experience they've had. And then now the next place they're going to go, whether it's college or the pros, they have another dietitian, they're probably going to dismiss that dietitian because of the one bad experience that I put them in that position. So that's why it's like sometimes we don't think of that big picture, but you have to think about everything you say, everything you do is going to get them to, think about what you do and who they're going to come across that may be similar in your profession or as a practitioner. And that may negatively affect people elsewhere. So that's why like you always got to present yourself as the most professional, always trying to support, always trying to help, and then do everything you can that the athlete is willing to allow you to let them do. Right. And some athletes that any of the practitioners on here that are listening come across, you're not going to be able to help every single person. Right. And some people don't want your help. Some people will want all your help. It just kind of depends on the setting, the situation, and the environment that you're able to kind of foster during the time that you're with them.
Yeah. And that's actually prompts me to think of a question, and knowing I'm thinking about my own field and how, I can kind of talk with my clients in a private setting to have these individual conversations with people. And I think a big part of building the rapport is having some type of confidential space where you're meeting privately, you're having these conversations. And I was thinking, because I know with your job, sometimes you can't always meet people in these private spaces. So like, what does it look like for you? How do you end up like talking with athletes, especially say you're on the court, you're in a corridor, you're in the gym somewhere where, there's other ears maybe listening in, and how do you have these conversations with people?
Yeah, I mean, it's all those places, right? And the big thing is you want to try to be in as many places as the athletes are going to be, because that increases your percentage or opportunity to try to get some kind of information or education into them, especially if they deal with a certain situation, like a guy catches a cramp, right? That's an opportunity for you to go over right during that moment, hopefully provide electrolytes or carbs or something that's going to get them, along with the athletic trainer's help with massaging, and hopefully get them back on the court quick so they can get back in the game or get back in the practice. But like if you do something in that moment that benefits that athlete and they see an instant change, or in this case, gets them back on the court, right? That kind of creates buy-in right away. Like, all right, Sean came over, athletic trainer came over, he did this, she did this, got back on the court in 5 minutes before I was out of the game or before I was off the court for 20 minutes. Right. And that's an easy way to get them to buy in, to listen to what you have to say. But to your original question, right? Like in my case where I'm at right now, I may be on the court and maybe in the weight room and maybe in our lounge area where the guys eat. Right. And it could be those quick 1-2 minute, it could be a little bit longer than that, depending on how much time the athlete wants to allow you to speak about that. I don't always go right in there and start talking about nutrition. Usually I'm dapping them up, fist bump, whatever kind of works for us, asking how they're doing, ask a couple, short little questions before I throw into like, all right, I have to be a little bit serious now and talk about this. Now I still do have one-on-one time. Like I have an assessment, I do one-on-ones. They are a little bit longer. We also do have something that's called, it was life skills. Now it's called pro habits. We're essentially trying to provide all the different disciplines that would essentially hopefully make our athletes as successful as possible. Right. We have a double certified sports psychologist on staff. We have myself for nutrition, They bring in someone for financial literacy. And then there's other parts of our company where they're bringing on things for like how to talk in front of media, right? So trying to essentially prepare them so if they get drafted or if they go to that next level of professional competition, hopefully we provided them enough skills that they can integrate and know how to function in this other environment, or at least teaching them some skills that if they don't know what to do, they at least know how to think and problem solve and how to essentially navigate those problems, or at the very least, worst case scenario, right? Like, all right, I got Sean. I could just text real quick. Hey, I'm at this airport. I got to get food. Like, what do you think would be a good thing to do? Right. So levels of how to navigate obstacles or problems, like when they're specifically in that moment, rather than having the mindset of, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to do it. Like I'm in the airport. I'm just going to eat what's good. Right. Or I'm talking to this reporter and I'm just going to say whatever I want and not think of the repercussions.
Yeah.
Right. So we're hoping this collection of people that we kind of have on staff is going to allow us to be able to provide that to the athletes to help them be as prepared as possible. Right. And that looks good for us as a company, because when they go to a pro level or they talk to somebody, any individual, whether it's an agent, a scout, another player, somebody from a company, right, they all say like, oh, they came from that spot. And and consistently we know like what product we're going to get or what type of player, what type of human we're going to get coming from this place is kind of the overall hope there.
Right. Absolutely.
So tell me also about how important do you feel working with an interdisciplinary staff is, right? I mean, whether it's a clinical setting or whether it's like obviously a sports setting, I think it really doesn't matter what job it is, right? You got to be able to work with the people around you, whether you like them or you don't like them, right? Whether tolerable or not tolerable. So tell me, how important is it working with other staff? And then how do you deal with those situations where there may be staff that are a challenge, but you have to essentially collaborate with them regardless the situation?
Sure. So with the first question, like what are the benefits of working on an interdisciplinary team? Currently in my own profession, I work with nurses, I work with program aides, I work with nurse practitioner or the doctor, and having that collaboration between other people and getting different insights from different disciplines of how you can approach a specific person from different angles and their different ideas is great, having those resources available to you. Now, when you find yourself having conflict, it can definitely be more troubling. And I think it's natural to sometimes have conflict within these disciplines because people are coming from their own mindsets with how people believe they should be fixing something or fixing a problem. We may have nurses on our end, thinking, this is the way what we need to have to change, and then counselors in this end saying this is the way we need to change. I think having good communication is always the best avenue through those difficult times where you're really trying to figure out how can I best approach this client with this particular issue. Communication, I think, is really key. Having good relationships with your coworkers, and on the times when you have down times where you're not always unprofessional, having those small conversations with people and building rapport even with staff, right? You talk about the importance of building rapport with the clients, like having good rapport with your other coworkers. If you are happy and you're happy with your team, the athletes are going to see that as well, and you're going to promote that type of happiness towards them.
So how do you deal with those staff that are challenging, that may have a totally different mindset from you, that may not always agree with you? Like there's going to be a place and time, right, where it's great to have constructive criticism, right? Like be able to accept it both ways, be able to have conversations about stuff both ways. Everyone, not everyone's going to have the same philosophy as one another, but I think ultimately is, can we come to a common ground? But how do you deal with those people that it almost feels like you can't come to that common ground? Like they're just constantly coming at you with something. You're like, man, can we just agree on something so we can essentially provide the best possible service to the individuals that we're working with?
Yeah, I think you really have to kind of see where they're coming from. You know, in certain professions, you know, you may have uh, people who are coming from a different expert role than you are, and if you find yourself in a conflict, you know, maybe you have to put yourself in their shoes a little bit and try to understand what perspective they're coming from. If you find yourself getting upset or angry, you know, with the individual, you might even need to take a second for yourself to step away and kind of see internally, what is happening with me personally, and maybe step away and stop looking at it from an external thing like this is someone else's problem, and look at yourself and say, you know, maybe I need to take like a breather and a minute away. It's normal to have those type of conflicts with people, but I think allowing yourself to either one, see where they're coming from in their perspective, and then two, looking at yourself and trying to identify, you know, why am I getting upset with this person's advice? You know, they're also an expert too. What can I take away? Or maybe if we can't come to a common ground, we can just agree to disagree, or have another third party come in, a supervisor or another person in another field, to try to help delegate and find that common ground. Because sometimes when two people aren't on the same page, having a third party there can help you come to a common solution.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points too, right? Like there's a lot of times, and especially if you're looking at athletics, right? Competition, the mood and the energy can be very high at times. And sometimes as an athlete, right? And I've been an athlete before, it's like you don't sometimes if you just give yourself 5 to 10 seconds, breathe, think about what's going on in that moment, you can hopefully redirect the action you're going to take before it becomes a reactive reaction,
Sure,
and then
sure.
something negative comes out of it, right? And it could be the same thing when you're talking to your own staff, right? Like the worst thing you want to say is something that's going to now break down that relationship that you didn't mean, but in the moment you were angry because of something maybe going on with you outside of anything that they said. And now you just totally blew something out of the water, and it's like, man, this
Yeah.
is not going to end well for me and the environment that I'm in now with that coworker. Like,
Mhm.
is it repairable? It could be a tough question to ask.
Right. No, that's why I said, you know, sometimes you have to look at yourself. Like, you know, sometimes you catch people, you know, and their baseline in terms of anger, you know, they're already up here where most people are down here. And, you know, you could just be going to a conversation, you don't know this person's up here already. And they get triggered and they're angry and they're upset right away over something small. So, you know, being mindful, and I think having the mindful attitude of just being aware of your thoughts and where you're coming into a conversation, right? You know, if you already had an upset interaction with someone earlier in the day, you may need to take a moment to yourself before you engage with someone else, so you're not exploding on someone else.
Yeah. And I got that from, several coaches that I work with, right? Like you got to bring your best energy, positivity, good body language every time you step into the office or every time you step into a room. Whatever's going on at home, like you need to keep that at home. Like that doesn't mean there isn't people in your space that you can have a conversation and talk about that. But like if it's negatively going to affect the athlete, that's going to affect the room, and then that's going to affect everybody else. And then now you may have lost that time or that session because of how you reacted or how your body language was that day. Like no athlete who's coming in to get, I don't want to say motivated by you, but like pushed and trained and engaged. No one wants to see someone slumping over looking like they're going to like tear their face off coming through the
Yeah,
door.
I can't tell you how many times I preach self-care with my own coworkers. You know, if you're not doing well yourself, how are you going to provide good care for other people? You know, too often you'll see people who are burnt out, who are either jaded or, you know, going in and providing what isn't their best work. And, you know, I think your own self-care is just as important as the education and kind of philosophy you're teaching other people, right? You know, practice what you preach. If you're telling people or athletes that, you know, they should be doing their best, you should be doing your best too. You know, take care of yourself before you take care of other people.
Exactly. And sometimes sometimes staff in some areas will joke about it. Like, oh, I'm eating potato chips, or like, oh, I got 6 hours sleep last night. It's like,
Sure.
okay, like you're probably deflecting because you're dealing with issues and you're not doing it as well. But like you saying that around the athletes, and if they really respect you, may change their opinion or mindset of how they specifically do something. And that's not what we need. So you take care of yourself, or if you're having issues, like you probably need to get on top of it, because if not, it could affect everybody at different levels.
Right.
Um,
I will
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
You're good. Go ahead.
yeah, I think modeling positive behavior so other people can see it is always beneficial, especially just with working with, especially young athletes, they need to see like appropriate behaviors. Like if you're modeling appropriate behaviors and professionalism, people will look up to that as that's the norm. That's what I should be doing, right? So, be mindful of like behaviors you're having around athletes because especially young athletes, because they really look up to you and the behaviors that you're modeling actually are much more meaningful than you think.
Yeah, right. They're very impressionable. And they're looking at that at every level, right? A lot of times, right, what are the pros doing? What are the pros doing? What are the pros doing? Or you'll get back like, oh, I saw the pros did this, so I'm going to do this. And a lot of times I try to tell them like, well, you don't need to compare yourself to be a Steph Curry. You don't need to be a Kevin Durant. Like you need to be the best you.
Yeah.
Right. You may never be that person, or all these people may make all these comparisons about you, but like, can you be the best you? Can you be the new best thing coming out, like behind your name and who you are, and not try to be in the shadow of somebody else?
Absolutely.
So kind of to wrap this up, I want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
What's maybe 2 or 3 people that you recommend for the people listening to follow, listen to their podcast, maybe hit them up in their DMs on Instagram or social media or something like that? Like, who would be your kind of go-to individuals to maybe obtain information that you're talking about, or just that you think that would be really valuable source to people in athletics in general?
I got 2 came right to mind. If you really want some great motivation, I think David Goggins is the guy to go to. Everyone listen to David Goggins. I mean, he has a great book as well, Can't Hurt Me. Fantastic book. I think if you're interested in motivation or looking for motivation to change and read something inspiring, I think that's a good book to go to, or look up his page. He posts videos of himself running, giving advice. I think his wife is usually driving in a car recording him, and he's yelling at the camera. They're really good, but he'll get you going in the morning, right? If you need a little boost of motivation, David Goggins. In terms of other advice, we talked a bit about motivational interviewing. If there's practitioners out there, or people who are looking to be trained in motivational interviewing, they have a great website itself. It's just motivationalinterviewing.org. There's trainings on there for people to be trained on the approach and to find different trainings to even just begin the initial learning process about that. The original book on motivational interviewing, it came out in the 80s. It still reads fantastic today. A lot of the stuff that's within there is just as good and can be applied today.
Yeah, and a little know about David Goggins. So if you listen to his audiobook, he has extra parts on there where like after each chapter, he'll like talk about the chapter and the experiences and what he was thinking and what he was going through like during that moment. So it's like a little extra behind the scenes moments there. So if you want to listen to that. And then anything you would recommend for people that are, trying to look or receive mental health services, maybe really quick.
Yeah, just allow yourself to be vulnerable. It's a tough world out there. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's the biggest thing. There's such a stigma on mental health. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think the help is out there, and it's just a matter of asking. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. Open up to others, right? The help is out there.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate having you on today. So everybody, I'm going to put all of Matt's bio and any of his contact information that he wants to provide. If you want to contact him up, have again, organic and real conversation. He's always definitely someone like anybody that I would bring on the onto the podcast that's going to be willing to have those discussions. Again, any of my information is also going to be in the show notes as well. If you want to contact me, have a conversation. Again, I'm trying to find as many inspiring and high-level practitioners as we can, again, to provide that well-rounded approach to our podcast. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.